I started out with GMSOL, and now we have our own coalition here at Vallejo, and we go up clear to Yountville. We started in Vallejo, but we eked up, and we now are in Yountville. So we cover, in Vallejo, we cover a lot of houses, 816 houses every month with our magazine, if you haven't seen it. It's fabulous. We're looking for advertisers to support local business, also that people shop locally. It could be Vallejo, it could be Napa, American Canyon, or Yountville. I'd like to first of all thank Senator Dodd's office for putting the summit on. We've got a few people here today that will be speaking on behalf, I've got to do this in 10 minutes, I've never talked in 10 minutes, that have come this afternoon to help us out. We've got HCD, we've got Brad, and I forgot your name, I'm sorry. Joe? Ignacio from HCD. We've got Mark from Mobile Magic. We've also got some of the park owners here, which is great. We have Tom from Senator Dodd's office that I'd like to come up next to me. Anyway, we got the Sires from Napa Olympia 2. We have Walter Newell from Carquinez Highlands, that's where I live. We have Bernice Newell from Newell's Mobile City. We also have Kim and Alejandra from Napa Fair Housing, which we use here in Vallejo, as well as all the way up Valley. And they give us a big hand. For 15 years they've helped me out because we get no action from the city itself here in Vallejo, so we have to reach out and go to other sources. We also have Eric that writes the magazine that works for Senator Nebo back there. If you haven't got the MRLs, they're back there. They have Dodd's office on them. You need to take that. That's 2019. We have it in Spanish as well as English. Have I missed anybody? No. So, Tom, do you want to come up here and say a couple words about Bill Dodd's office? Are you around?
Just went in there.
Oh, he just went in there. Hey. There? Oh my God, he's in the closet.
Hey.
Come out of the closet, Dodd.
I was just checking on the volume. I wasn't trying to hide. Anyway, I wasn't really on the agenda or planning to speak today, but I want to thank everybody for being here. This is a great turnout. Maybe you could all give yourself a round of applause. And that also extends to the park owners. I appreciate the park owners being here today. It's important that we have partnerships between the residents and the owners and that everybody work together because, as you all know, mobile home law is a completely separate thing from county or city law. And hopefully, before you leave today, you'll have a chance to pick up one of those mobile home residency law books that are provided by HCD, who is here today and will give a great presentation on some of the things to look out for as owners and as residents. And then at the end, we'll have a chance to do question and answer. So make sure you grab a card if you have any questions, and we'll try to get everybody's questions answered. So I don't want to take up too much time, but I think next on our agenda was fair housing in Napa Valley. Come on up.
I'm coming.
Well, I see a lot of our clients that are here, so the owners that we work with, and if you don't know about our agency, that's why we're here today. We want to assist the mobile home community here in Vallejo as well as up to Napa. Napa County is really our area, but we have been assisting, Vallejo. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So we want to assist all the residents that are here in mobile home parks in Vallejo as well as Napa County that we have been dealing with, mostly just Napa, but we see the need that is coming out of Vallejo a little bit more now than it used to be. We work closely with Miss Terry, and I appreciate you inviting us today.
My pleasure.
I love it, and she does this on her own time. She doesn't get paid for this, so I appreciate you. And we're going to kind of go through the brochure here, if you guys have that. Alejandra is new to our office and doing her education, so today's her first presentation. So if you have questions while you're going through this, our phone number is on this brochure. Give our office a call so we can do a one-on-one conversation with you, especially when it deals with fair housing, which is discrimination, or if you have some issues that you may need our assistance on, modifications, and she'll get into that. If you need assistance with ramps or lifts or any of those type of things, we have grants that we can help assist and pay for that for your mobile home. So I'm going to turn it over to Alejandra, and I'll be in the back. If at any time you want to come back and have a chat, I'm there. And here's Alejandra.
All right. Thanks everybody for having me, Ms. Terry. Thank you. So I'm going to get into a little bit about what we do. Some of the services that we do at Napa Fair Housing are review some of the policies and practices that we all have, mediation and resolutions for disagreements that may pertain to landlords and tenants. We do help with counsel and discuss and educate both, again, landlords and tenants. And then we also train agency staff and property owners and managers about fair housing laws and the different rights. And some additional services that we do offer at Fair Housing in Napa are investigate complaints. We do that through different types of monitoring the complaints that come in. We do different types of testing, and we do conciliation and advocacy for tenants and landlords. And again, we do the complaint monitoring after the complaint's been filed with HUD or DFHEC. And then depending on the case by case, we do refer everybody, or when needed, to different legal assistance. And like I mentioned, some of the fair housing, what the fair housing law is it helps prohibit the discrimination and provides protections for disabled people. And then I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with the Fair Housing Act or what it is, but it is, what the Fair Housing means is just equality of treatment for everybody. And as Kim was mentioning about the RAs and RMs, it's reasonable accommodation, reasonable modifications. What the reasonable accommodation is mainly accommodations that would be in writing, and reasonable modifications would be accommodations that would be needed in a home. For example, installing a ramp, lowering a threshold, whatever it may be, we can also assist with that if needed. Getting into emotional support animals and service animals, that is a pretty broad subject. So if you guys have any questions in regards to that, we would be happy to answer any questions. And then we also do assist with the different types of notices that can be served and are usually worked with, which would be 30-day notices, 60-day notices, 3-day notices. So if you guys have any questions in regards to any types of notices received, or if you guys are landlords and you guys are looking to give out a notice, we'd be able to assist you with giving the proper notice and serving it properly. And then we just want to reassure that everybody is submitting everything in writing. It's something that is always really, really important. We try to just put it out there, that make sure that everything, correspondence is always in writing. And then another question that we do get a lot is about security deposit after a tenant has moved out. And just a fact that I don't want to get too much into detail right now, but if you guys have any questions in regards to that, you guys can reach out to me. I'll be in the back. You guys can come up to me whenever you guys feel free to have, or you guys have a second. And just referencing back to the 21 or the security deposit, A landlord does have 21 days to return the security deposit from the day the tenant moves out. And again, just want to reassure that everybody gets the memo. Everything must be in writing. And does anybody have any questions right now?
Does this cover Venetian mobile home park too?
Unfortunately, it doesn't. So her question was, does this cover Benicia mobile home? And unfortunately, doesn't at the moment.
How could it be Solano County? Vallejo's Solano.
So we typically work with Solano or Napa County and parts of Vallejo. So we're working on covering Solano County at the moment.
Question.
So any questions? If you guys want to come back to the back and ask them individually to me, I'll be in the back. Yes.
A bigger question about the whole thing.
Okay.
Now, the gentleman before you stated that mobile home law is different from city law and county law. I don't understand how that can exist. City law is city law, county law is county law. Mobile home law is different.
You can ask that question of the coalition.
Yeah.
Ask that question of the coalition, did you get your answer? So come over to talk to the coalition, Ms. Terry, right after the meeting, or during the question.
I would just say, well, like something that everybody would like to know that concept.
Okay. All right. Thanks everybody for having me.
Again, as we said, if you have questions, in order to try to help expedite the various speakers we have, if you can fill out a card or save your question till the end. Also, Eric, who's coming up next, is going to try to answer your question while he's giving his presentation. So, one thing we also want to do was to thank the Moose Lodge for their support of this event, and the Governor Gary Madison, Dennis Bartlett, the Treasurer, the incoming Governor Joe Blaha, and he is the Administrator, and Rita Madison. Thank you to all of you for supporting our event today. They're in the back of the room. They're holding down the coffee. Please help yourself also to refreshments, coffee, etc. Hopefully we'll have enough exciting information that you don't need too much coffee, but you never know. So next we have the consultant to the Senate Select Committee on Manufactured Home Communities. Kind of a mouthful, but it's a very important thing, especially to the members of our audience today. And the chair of that select committee is Senator Leyva, and Senator Dodd, as of April 1st, was just appointed to be on that committee as well. So Senator Dodd will be here shortly, and he'll have a chance to share a few words with you. But without any further hesitation, I'd like to introduce to you Eric Guerrera, who is a consultant to the Select Committee on Mobile Homes. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Tom. Can everybody hear me okay? Good. First of all, I do want to give a big round of applause for Terry with the Vallejo Mobile Home Coalition. Let's give her a big round of applause. Without people like Terry who are calling us every day, working with HCD, with the Select Committee, with Senator Dodd's office, Senator Leyva's office, the local mobile home folks, then we really can't get events like this together. I want to also thank HCD, who's here, the Department of Housing and Community Development. We have Ignacio and Brad over there. Let's give a big round of applause. The Department of Housing and Community Development. A little too loud now here for the front here. The office that I work for is the Senate Select Committee on Manufactured Home Communities. What do we do? What does HCD do? What are the different agencies do? This goes to the question about different laws. The Senate Select Committee, We are a research and policy office for the Senate. We actually produce these booklets here, the mobile home one, and this is a brand new one. For those who speak Spanish, this is brand new. We've been working on this for the last couple of years. And this one here is looked at, we do this every year. Now our office, a couple things what it doesn't do. It is not a legal office, so we don't provide legal assistance. And two, it is not an enforcing agency. So we are not the body that goes out there and provides penalties and whatnot. But what we do provide is research for the senators on trying to tackle some of these questions, and we go off those ideas. An important thing to think about is we know that there's federal law, the Congress and the president make laws, and then everybody else has to follow them. Then we have state law, which the legislature, like Senator Dodd and Senator Leyva, put ideas together, and then the governor passes it. The civil code, that is state law. That is the law that governs everything above the counties and the cities. Cities and counties also can do their local ordinances and local laws. Most of the mobile home, manufactured home community laws are in the civil code in state law. The rules of how quality and healthcare and all of those are also part of the state law, and those are governed in Title 25, the Code of Regulations, and the Department of Housing and Community Development will talk about those for an hour this afternoon. That's the big meat and potatoes that we're going to talk about today. The health and safety standards of our mobile home communities. This changes every year, but I just want to make sure, I'm not going to go through this whole thing, but the most important page on this in this book is the first page. Well, actually, it's technically the second page, or third page, the introduction. If you go to the introduction page here, in the introduction page, every year, this bottom two paragraph changes. And it changes because it's the quick snapshot of what has changed in state law. If a law changed in the civil code, none of us, I'm not an attorney, none of us here maybe be attorneys, maybe we might have a couple of attorneys back there, but this is that first page on the introduction. Every year when this comes out, you can look at it and find out, did they change the civil code? And is there anything new? For example, in this packet also, if you have fallen behind on your registration and you've got your fees and taxes have been piling up, there's an amnesty program in place that ends this year. And it tells you right here that the application must be applied before December 30th, 2019. So we try to put the most relevant information right up front, and that application we've included in the back of this booklet, so you can fill it out yourself, or you can go online and get it. But that's the most important thing I think we want to bring up. So the Select Committee, again, we try to provide research and information for folks like Senator Dodd and Tom Barty's office on things that are happening. And sometimes we come out with ingenious new ideas. For example, I do want to give Senator Dodd recognition for helping Senator Leyva in getting in the last election in Proposition 1, there was this big proposition for housing, $30 million to replace and retrofit old mobile homes. And that is now, that was voted by the voters. If you guys voted for Proposition 1, now there are $30 million that the applications are being processed and made up right now, and the regulations on how to get that, access that with HCD through the CalHome program. But there's going to be $30 million, hopefully later this year, once that all gets done, that voters voted on in November because of Senator Dodd and Senator Leyva, who said we need to find resources to replace and retrofit old mobile homes. So that's a little bit of what the Select Committee does. The other thing we do is we also track some of the state legislation. So if you have questions about the legislative process, or your mobile home community doesn't know, what's happening in the state capitol, we can give you some background about what's happening in the state capitol. And you can always call your local legislator. I always say, go local, talk to your representative. That's who you vote in, and that's who you can vote out. But hopefully, you can keep voting them in if they're doing a good job. And Senator Dodd has been fighting, I know, a lot. We've been working with his office on mobile homes. But the point is, you can also call our office on updates on legislation. For example, we just heard a bill this last week to require that insurance companies provide all mobile home residents the information about their insurance plans and Bill of Rights. And why was that important? Because when we had the fires up in the north, a lot of the mobile home owners didn't have a copy of the insurance plan. Once they had renewed their insurance, the insurance company never sent them an updated copy. So after the fire and everything, they didn't know how to access their new information. So while that may seem small, but that's an important piece of new law that we're putting into place. With that, again, we're going to be here this afternoon. The Senate Select Committee, again, I work for the Senate, all the senators. The chair of the committee is Senator Leyva from San Bernardino, but she goes all over the place, and she apologizes. I think she had a pancake breakfast in San Bernardino today, so couldn't make it all the way up to Vallejo. But wants to make sure that we're always here to help out folks in the manufactured and mobile home communities. Thank you very much, and glad to be here. I'll take a question right there.
Okay, I do have a question. You mentioned retrofit for the mobile home parks. I purchased a home brand new in 2005. And at that time, it had insurance through the company that I bought it from. Shortly after that, I ended up with no insurance. Then when I found out I was in a flood zone, I tried to, in fact, I did contact FEMA. And FEMA told me that I had to be sure that I had blood retrofitted under my house, or they would not insure me. So then I contacted one of the guys that work in the mobile home park. He went under there, checked. I did not have that tie down that they were asking for, so they would not insure me. So
I'm gonna ask and maybe Ignacio and Brad to think about that question, because it deals with the infrastructure of the park, maybe the home, and that's something I want everybody to remember. Title 25. Can everybody repeat Title 25? Good. Okay. Good. Now everybody heard Title 25 now 3 times, so you maybe won't forget it. But that's the area that Brad and Ignacio, the brick and mortar of the parks and the homes, and that's what they enforce. But we'll see if they can answer something about that. I know when it deals with insurance policy, that's a legal question to insurance folks, and that's not an area that I'm not familiar with, but maybe they can help out when they come up. Yes, I saw your hand up.
yeah, you were talking about the $30 million.
Yes.
Where does that cover? Does that cover all mobile homes around? Or
That's a good question.
In Vallejo?
Yeah, that's going to be all the state of California. So the Department of Housing and Community Development is now building the regulations and the application and who's eligible and who can access that amount and how the applications are going. The Senate, what they did is they put together this question to the voters. Should we or should we not have money and resources for mobile home retrofit in California? The voters said yes, and now that the voters said yes, now it's the department's responsibility to create the process and the details. And as soon as those details come out, I'll be working with them and also our senator's office to get that out to everyone. Terry, for sure, I know is going to hunt me down and make sure that I get her the information once we find that as well.
No more questions right now. We have to get through this afternoon. I'm sorry. We'll take them at the end of the conference or the summit. And then you can ask your questions. If you'll hold them for just a couple more minutes until we get through this, then you can ask the questions and we'll introduce your cards to the appropriate people.
Well, thank you everyone very much. Make sure that you do not leave without getting one of these books. And if you know somebody who doesn't speak English and speaks Spanish, get them a little book for Christmas too, or the holidays. So thank you very much.
Okay, we're going to skip a little bit on the agenda and go straight to housing and community development. They basically as Eric pointed out, are sort of the meat and potatoes of what we're trying to do here today. And after the presentation, as was pointed out, we'll have an opportunity for a pretty lengthy question and answer session. So please, if you have any questions, put them down on the card and give them to Terry, and we'll go through them after the presentation. So take it away.
Thanks for having me, everyone. I'm sure you can hear me. I talk pretty loud. I didn't have the best trip over here.
Who are you?
I'm sorry. My name's Brad Harward. I'm with the Department of Housing. I'm Chief of Field Operations. Okay. I have been with the department for 19 years and 4 months. So I have 8 months to go. I'm going to retire. A little background on me. I started building RVs when I was 16 years old. I actually worked for somebody. I didn't build them on my own. I was an installer for many years. I installed literally thousands of mobile homes. I helped build two mobile home parks. I managed an RV park. I lived in a mobile home park. I owned a mobile home. I became a field inspector in 1999. That was 19 years ago, 19 and a half almost. I got promoted several times to where I was the parks program manager, and one of my functions was to rewrite the park regulations, the mobile home park regulations, and to create the special occupancy park regulations, which are RV parks. Did that, took 2.5 years on working on that. A couple more promotions to where I am today. So I'm a little too close. So I'm Chief Field Operations. I'm an administrator. It's called a Codes and Standards Administrator 3. And I'm here to talk to you about several different things. So, as I was going to say, I didn't have the best trip down here. About 1 mile from the exit, if you're coming east on 80, don't get in the far right lane. There's a great big pothole that blew my tire out. So I'm not happy. That was in the very far right lane, and I thought it was a patch there or something. It's not, believe me. It's anyway, a couple things, a little bit of housekeeping. We did bring some materials for you over there. One of the things that says this, we are moving. If you're getting construction permits and stuff, that office has not moved. This is the registration and titling office, or actually the rest of our division. Part of the affordable housing monies that get distributed to the state are done through the Department of Housing. Actually, the code enforcement or codes and standards is a very small part, or kind of a small part of HCD. Most of HCD deals with housing elements and affordable housing and affordable housing loans and stuff like that. Well, because Proposition 1 and 2 passed, the department is going to hire a bunch more people, and they had nowhere to put them, so basically they kicked us out. So that all of the housing, affordable housing people could all be in the same building, because the building just wasn't big enough for everyone. So the registration and titling has moved next door to where the area office is, if anybody's ever gone there to get a permit or something. So that's what that's about. Another thing is this Mobile Home Assistance Center. This is what used to be called the Ombudsman. Nobody could spell it or write it or pronounce it, so we changed it to Mobile Home Assistance Center, which is more accurate. There's also one here on HCD announcements. We finally, within the last year or so, you can make payments online. Wow. Coming into the 20th century. Let's see. Another thing is that Eric touched on it here in the back of this booklet. I had it. Is the fee and tax waiver program. If you do not hold title to your mobile home, or if you know somebody who doesn't have their title, I really encourage them to do it. And this is the form you fill out. It lets you, well, for one, we won't issue a permit to fix anything on a house you don't own. It's basically somebody else's house. So I really encourage that you or that person to register their home. It's a fee and tax waiver program. You can only do it once. And if you just simply haven't paid it, but it is registered in your name, that doesn't work. You can't do that. But so far we have waived over $1 million in back taxes and fees. So it lets somebody get insurance on their home. It lets them repair it. Unfortunately, with the big fires in Paradise, a lot of people just lost everything because the house wasn't in their name. And, you know, there's nothing that can be done. So really encourage you to do it if you haven't already. Yes. I also brought an information bulletin on the Mobile Home Residency Law Protection Act, which will be coming up next year. It's a 3-year pilot program, but it doesn't get implemented for 1.5 years because they have to write regulations, they have to collect fees to operate everything. But this is where your mobile home residency law issues can be dealt with. They have to be pretty egregious. So it's not, and they're not going to handle every one because they can't, but basically you're going to file a complaint through the Mobile Home Assistance Center with your MRL issue. They will triage them because they can only do the really bad ones, and then they refer it to a legal aid society or association. So it's not HCD enforcing it, but we will have to investigate it, and there are people that are being hired now to do that. So this is something that's coming along. It'll probably be about July of next year when it actually gets implemented, but that's a good thing because there's never been a real enforcement arm for MRL issues. Okay. So we had thought about bringing doing a video. Screen's kind of small, and so basically I'm just going to talk about it. They asked me to talk about the mobile home park maintenance inspection program, and I do have handouts of the presentation, but I apologize for making it so small. It's hard for me to read too. I should have made them 2 on the page, but trying to save paper didn't work. Currently, there are roughly 4,600 mobile home parks in the state. And that's mobile home parks. There's another about 900 RV parks. There are 393,512 lots in mobile home parks. So that's a huge amount. We have 48 inspectors. That's all. And in some instances, as Ignacio is very well aware, keeping somebody in the Bay Area is very difficult. So we are really taxed on that. Our permits for construction work have gone up over 100% in the last 3 years. I guess that's when the economy gets better, people start constructing, they build things or repair things. We also, as part of our function, oversee migrant worker camps. And that load has gone up tenfold because we now oversee what's called H-2A facilities, which are the federal program that when you bring migrant workers in, they have to provide housing. They're required to be inspected, and we got that job. So it is a big task for us. We are kind of stretched very thin, so please bear with us if you have issues or inspections that you need or filing complaints. It's really tough thing. But currently there are also 70 local enforcement agencies. Anybody under a local enforcement agency? Napa County, San Mateo, not too many in the north. The vast majority, are down south. That is a city or county that has assumed enforcement from HCD. They really can't enforce anything differently than we do. They're just local. So the mobile home park inspection program, or the mobile home park maintenance inspection program, basically started in 1990. As you're aware, you get part of it. You may be aware that there's a $4 per space fee. That's what funds this program. And $2 of that can be assessed back to the residents. $4 doesn't go very far, and it has not changed since 1990. So if you picture a 100 space park, we collect $4 or $400 a year. So that's not going to go very far. The program varied in different times. When it initially started, there was a mandate that HCD inspect every park every 5 years. And since that was in 1990, basically started in 1991, there was an earthquake down south, you may remember, the Northridge earthquake in 1994. And that took up all of our time, so we couldn't go and do all of these inspections. So they extended the program to every park every 7 years. And then we still really couldn't catch up. So they made it 8 years, and then a couple years later they made it back to 7. For many, many years, it was every park every 7 years. That's still a huge task for us. That's 4,600 parks that we would have to inspect without any additional inspectors. It ended up that with the funding that was available at the $4 per lot and the number of inspectors we had, we could only do roughly 35% in that timeline. This legislation sunsets or goes away every 7 years. So we could do 35% within that 7 years. So in 2006, the legislation was amended to read that we have a goal of inspecting 5% of the parks per year. And then at the end of the 7 years, it would be 35%. So that's where we currently are. It is not every park every 7 years as it had been for years and years. It is now a goal of inspecting 5% of the parks. And currently 5% is 185 parks. Some people say, just the other day I was speaking with a group and they said, well, my park has never been done. Well, it probably has been done, but in the early 90s. But if your park is not real bad, it's not going to get inspected. There just isn't enough because we're only doing 185 a year. Some parks that are really bad are going to get hit more than once. I personally have inspected some parks more than one time within a couple of years. So just understand that this is the bad parks, the really egregious parks. Also, when we first started the MPM, there was a mobile home park maintenance program. We would cite every violation. We also were doing it by hand, so it makes it pretty extensive. There's a lot of work. And we would cite every single violation. And in 1999, the legislature changed the laws again to require that we set up a task force to determine the violations that were to be cited during the park inspection. They did that, and in 1999, the task force started. It developed the violations, and the only violations that can be cited during the park inspection are either immediate or unreasonable risk to life, health, or safety. An immediate risk really isn't jotted down and noted for a notice later. We have to write an immediate correction notice. It's basically sewage on the ground, a gas leak, those type of really bad things. The unreasonable risk to life, health, or safety are your fire separation issues. Maybe there's roof leaks, siding, broken windows, those type of things. So the process currently, because it's been changed a couple times, is we do a pre-inspection conference with the park. We post the park that an inspection is pending. We're required to give at least 30-day notice. So we give typically a 60-day notice. And we say that the park will be inspected in 30 to 60 days. The reason we go to the park and have that pre-inspection conference is to get a list of all the residents, to send a notice directly to every resident that they're going to have this park inspection. Also, we provide booklets to the park. We have copies of them over here, and they are available on our website. Just to let you know what type of things we're going to be looking for during the inspection. We will do that pre-inspection conference, we post the park, we send you a notice, and then typically 45 to 60 days later, we do the inspection. Inspector walks the park, writes down any violations that they see, but only the unreasonable risks to life, health, or safety. And then we send an individual violation notice to each resident and a violation notice to the park for theirs. They are not interchanged. The park gets their violations, you get your violations. You're given 60 days to correct those violations, whether it's missing handrail or steps or anything like that. At the end of that 60 days, we do another inspection. And if the violation remains, you have an additional 30 days to make the correction. But at that time, we will send the notices to the park too, and post any park violations in a conspicuous location in the park. We do that because the park is ultimately responsible for any violations that exist in the park. There's a health and safety code section that says just that the park shall abate any nuisance in a park within 5 days or a longer period of time is determined by the enforcement agency. So we give them that additional 30 days. We used to do multiple re-inspections. We obviously will have to do one more to see if the violation is cleared or not. We will no longer do that. We don't have the staff to go back and do 4 and 5 re-inspections like we used to do, even though some things were getting corrected as it went along. Now, what we'll do is the inspection, a re-inspection, another re-inspection to see if that one was cleared, and then we will send the park a notice of intent to suspend their permit to operate. Now, we're not closing the park. That's not what that is. But I use my air quotes here. Operating a park is collecting rent. And so by suspending that permit to operate, they cannot collect rent. So no matter how much it would have cost the park to fix something, losing a month's rent is way more. And it usually works pretty good. We have no ability to fine anyone or to issue an administrative fine to the park or a resident. We don't have that ability. So doing the suspension is actually very effective. Although we have had parks for quite a while have had their permit to operate suspended. Now, I say you don't pay rent, But if your utilities were included in rent or somehow, you have to pay your utilities. That's not, I don't have to pay anything, it's just the rent portion of it. Wow. This is going way faster than I thought, sorry. There is one thing that comes up quite a bit. We'll have an inspection, say a storage cabinet, storage shed gets cited. It's on the lot line, it's a wood shed. And then what we typically hear is that shed's been there for 15 years. It's grandfathered. Well, in reality, no, it's not. If there was nothing within 6 feet of it on the other lot, remember we're only citing unreasonable risk, that's not an unreasonable risk. If somebody built something over there or put a new home in, and now it's less than 6 feet away from that, now it is an unreasonable risk. It's a fire hazard. It's a fire separation issue. Grandfathering, and well, I'll tell you one other thing about storage cabinets. If the storage cabinet was installed before June of 1979, then it can be there. So I don't think you've had any that have been there that long. Maybe 45, 50-year-old shed. But grandfathering, you cannot grandfather an illegal situation. So if it was installed after 1979 and it was put on a lot line, that was illegal, even in 1985. So just keep that in mind. Let's see, where am I? Oh. Anybody, and when you get a violation notice, anybody can ask for an informal conference. You do have to do it in writing, and you do have to, there's some timelines, you have to do it within 10 days of receiving your violation, but we're very lenient on it. And what we will give you is literally an informal conference. It's somebody coming out, like Ignacio, and he'll explain it. And it may simply be, I don't understand what you're citing here. Or I disagree. If you've already corrected it, great, you don't need the informal conference because that's going to be picked up on the next inspection. But it'll be somebody like Ignacio come out and explain the violation to you, show you what it is. I'm really trying to get my inspectors to be a little clearer on their notes when they're writing something up. I was at a meeting and somebody got a violation notice that there was a damaged awning column. And she said, I have 3 awnings, which one is it? My initial response was, it's the one with the damaged column, but that should have been written as, carport, front porch, that type of thing, so that it was clear. So, if you have your informal conference and you don't like the decision from that, you can ask for a hearing. It's still somewhat informal. It's not a formal hearing, would be an administrative law judge and all that. It's a hearing to dispute the findings of the informal conference. You can't have a hearing without the informal conference. So, and then that decision is pretty much final. So, let's see. How quickly running in this? You want to do anything, or you want me to open this, or what?
Why don't we do,
Or do you want me to ask about anything that I just talked about at work?
I've had a chance to look at all the questions, and there's a lot of great questions. Before we go to that, and you can hang up here for a minute if you'd like, we have a gentleman here from Legal Services of Northern California. His name's Ollie Ellinger. And thank you for being here today. Ollie, maybe you can come on up and do a quick introduction before we get started on the Q&A. Please, a round of applause for Ollie.
Looks like we're doing guests by alternating height, right? One short, one tall. So my name is Ollie Ellinger. I'm the managing attorney of Legal Services of Northern California. We provide free civil legal advice, advocacy, and representation for low-income, senior, and disabled individuals. My organization covers all the counties in California north of the Bay Area. My office here in Vallejo with my 5 attorneys and I, we covered just Solano County. And we see a lot of folks who are mobile home owners come into our office with a myriad of issues from eviction to trying to sell. We just want to make sure you folks know that we're a resource for you. We're free, we're absolutely free. So that means there are a lot of folks knocking on our doors, trying to get assistance with reasonable accommodations like the folks at Napa Fair Housing talked about, trying to get assistance with a notice to terminate, trying to get assistance with the ability to sell a mobile home. And so if you have an issue that you need legal advice on, we're a great place to start. I can't promise you we can take you from A to Z, but we're a good place to start, and we know the folks who can. I have some cards that I left on my seat that I will place over there if Terry will let me use her table. So if you have a legal issue, I encourage you to call our office and see what we can do to help. I just want to make one more point. To the gentleman's point over there at the very beginning, talking about mobile home law is different than city law, than county law, than state law. I'd like to elaborate on that just the tiniest little bit because I don't have to give the disclaimer that I'm not a lawyer, because I am a lawyer, so I feel like I can say that the state law in that thick, beautiful packet provides the floor. These are the floor of your rights. But any county you live in, any city you live in, has the ability to give folks more rights or make processes more clear. So for instance, in Vallejo, we have a mobile home rent control ordinance. We had it, and we didn't have it. Now we have it again, probably in large part thanks to a lot of the folks in this room. But that's something that helps the folks who live in our community face the reality that things are becoming a lot more expensive, coupled with the reality that a mobile home isn't mobile. But a mobile home is a very important asset to folks. And so if the folks who live there don't have the protection, they lose that asset, they lose that anchor. And so there is an opportunity for folks who are knowledgeable and folks who are involved in their community to build on that floor that the fine folks at the Senate, that the fine folks like Senator Dodd and his office provide, and get stronger protections. Vallejo has mobile home rent control. Benicia doesn't. Benicia has a mobile home closure ordinance. Vallejo doesn't. And so there's a lot of Swiss cheese out there, a lot of holes to be plugged, and that's every time I have someone who's a mobile home owner sitting across the desk from me, they're by far in a way the most knowledgeable clients I have. And so using that knowledge and using that community to make sure you protect yourself in the best way is something that I think you folks have an opportunity to that most other folks don't. So again, I'll put my cards out there, so if you have a legal issue, you can feel free to call our office. Please, if you're stuck on our phone or leave a voice message, we'll do our very best to get back to you. Like I said, we have 5 attorneys, and we helped 1,500 folks last year, so we're doing the best we can to a lot of folks out there with a lot of different issues. And the very last thing I'll say is that we help with more than just mobile home issues. If you're having a problem with a pension that you used to get, or you're having a problem with Social Security, or you're having a problem with a garnishment from something that has nothing to do with where you live, it's going to affect where you live. If you're losing your Social Security, you can't pay for your rent. Now you're having problems somewhere else. And so any issue that's coming up to you that's a civil issue is something we might be able to at least tell you what's going on and give you your rights and give you direction. So again, thank you so much for having me. Thanks for giving up some of your Sunday. So Tom would like me to be a little more specific here. So my office is at 1810 Capitol Street, and that's at Tuolumne and Solano, across from the courthouse and the county building and the China Barn.
Your phone number?
It's going to be on the cards, but sure, I'm happy to give it out. Our main line is 707-643-0054. We have one amazingly talented staff member who both mans our window when folks walk in and answers our phones. So it is highly likely you'll get a voice message, and we We return all calls within 1 business day.
Could you repeat the address?
Do I have a cell phone? I do have a cell phone. I'm not giving out that number. I'm so sorry.
Can you repeat the address?
Yes, and so, ma'am, I have cards that I will put over there that has the information for my office and all our offices across the state. But the address again here in Solano County is 1810 Capitol Street. Yes, ma'am.
What you said something about a closure in Benicia.
Yes, so the lady's question is, I had mentioned a closure in Benicia. And so Benicia has a municipal code section that deals with what a park has to do when it wants to close or change use, right? And so there are state laws that mandate what a park has to do, and they're very general. But the state allows jurisdictions to be more specific. And so Benicia has chosen to pass a law that lays out specific steps for what a mobile home park has to do before they close in Benicia. And so Benicia's got that. Vallejo doesn't have anything like that. Fairfield doesn't have anything like that. So the point I was trying to convey is that state law provides a floor for your rights, but the cities and the counties you live in can be more protective or more specific.
How about
As
now?
far as closing the park and having you move out?
That's correct, yes ma'am, as far as closing the park. And the lady behind you asked about Napa, and I honestly don't know about Napa. I know the folks at Fair Housing of Napa will know. Off the top of my head, I'd assume they have stronger ordinances than here. I have a vague recollection that there's a strong owners group there in Napa County, and they've talked a lot. And I think a lot of the ag workers who make those vineyards grow and bloom and send folks in their Teslas up from the peninsula to go to Napa, they rely on those folks, and so I think it's been more of a vested interest. But I've gone astray.
Where's your funding come from?
Well, so the woman in the back asked, where's our funding come from? We get a chunk of funding from the federal government through an organization called the Legal Services Corporation. That's about 1/3 of our budget. We get about 1/3 of our budget from the State Bar Association. So anytime a lawyer takes money into their trust account, that trust account generates interest, and that interest is used to fund legal services so that everybody who has a legal question can try and get an attorney to answer it. And the last 1/3 of our budget comes from attorney's fees from cases we win, from smaller grants. The city of Vallejo has a grant with us, things of that nature. And I think that's about it. And I'll do it. No, thank you, folks.
All right, well, thank you, Ollie. After I've heard everything he says he can do, I think I'm going to be at his office tomorrow morning. So the next portion of our forum summit, if you will, we'll have our 3 experts up here, including Ollie, and well, I'll read the question, and then we'll look to see who might be the best, most qualified person to make an answer to the question. So our first question is several questions in one. First of all, who controls trailer parks, state, county, or city? And I think we may have already answered that, but is there any more clarification on that? You want to give us a quick answer on that?
Yeah. Quick answer. Of course, it means the question is, what do you mean by control? The state has adopted statewide regulations that apply to all mobile home parks. That they're strictly health and safety related. The state legislature has adopted mobile home residency laws, and then, as was just mentioned, some cities or counties have different provisions for parks. Also, land use is always a local issue, same as zoning. So basically, like, you can't run a business in a mobile home park that you can't run in any other residential area. But HCD oversees the health and safety issues. The residency law deals with your contractual issues, and then cities or counties have land use. Hopefully that answers it.
All right, while you're there, can you read this and then answer that?
If there are 4,600 mobile home parks in California, how do you pick the 185 parks? Legislation says that we pick the parks based on the most health and safety complaints. We also, as we're doing other inspections in the park, the inspector looks around and goes, this park needs a maintenance inspection. So those are primarily how it's done. Getting a whole bunch of people to issue the same complaint really doesn't have that effect. We don't deal with, basically we would roll all of those together anyway. So I have had that scenario where it's virtually copied and people sign it differently. That to us is basically the same complaint, but it's the most health and safety complaints. It's over a period of time, so that's how they're chosen.
Okay. So the next question was the $30 million for retrofit and replacement of old mobile homes. Does that include manufactured homes? And the answer to that is yes, it does. And as you know, and Brad can probably get into more detail of this, but 1976 was kind of the big change in federal law that started using the term manufactured homes. But the answer is yes. Basically, it's going to look at the conditions of the manufactured home or the mobile home, and HCD is still working on those rules about who gets to apply. I think, in my understanding, it's going to be under a current program called Cal Home, and it'll be specific for mobile and manufactured homes. So the answer to that question is yes.
Maybe you better.
Yeah. All right, and I'm pretty good at reading handwriting, but if I make a mistake, please bear with me. This next question is, what rights do we have if forced to move due to park closure? Would that be something you could answer?
I deal with that a lot, but if you want to do it, I guess I could talk generally and then go
We'll share.
Okay.
Basically, program stuff. There is a government code section that applies where land use issues are located. And it basically says that a park has to pay the reasonable costs of relocation. That isn't much. That's what it would cost to move your home to another place. Doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be moved to another place. It's the reasonable cost of relocation. Now, as was mentioned, and do it again, many cities or counties have adopted closure ordinances. And in that closure ordinance, it says, it may say you have to pay the in-place value of your home, or they have to physically move you or compensate you in other ways to, what normal housing costs are and that type of thing.
So I don't have much to add to that answer. I'll say that something common to a lot of the closure ordinances is once a park puts in a petition to close or an application to close the park, it freezes rent increases for a period, right? And so the idea would be to keep the park from going around, instead of paying the cost to get folks to move, just sky high the rent so folks move instead. So it freezes rents. That's something that I know that Benicia has. I'm not certain what other cities and counties have that. And the only other point I'd make is that closure isn't always the park owner one day saying, well, I want to put up a roller coaster here. Closure sometimes is a longer process. It's the change of a park from fully owner-owned to people renting from there. Or it's one by one, when people get evicted, those spaces not getting filled up until you're the last one in there. And so closure and change of use can mean a lot of things, and it's important to take a look at what's going on in your community over time and see if your rights are triggered by something that's not a neon sign saying we're closing.
So one thing, if you're interested in closure law, there is a bill in the legislature right now, Assembly Bill 705, Assembly Bill 705 by Assemblymember Mark Stone, that is going through the legislature. And it could change, and as sausage making happens, they're putting a little pepper in it now and whatever else goes into sausage. But if that law does pass, we will notify you in this book in the next year whatever it turns out. It's going through its first hearings right now. In June, it'll go through the Senate hearings, and then after that, it'll go before the governor.
What would it do?
What is the law?
What they're discussing is the question about what is reasonable relocation, and also what steps have to be taken to do that. And so I could go into detail, but more than likely it's going to change in the next couple of weeks. So it's kind of one of those things that's, let's just monitor it, and then we'll see how it'll advance in the next couple months. It is sponsored by the GSMOL, the Golden State Mobile Home Owners League, and they're the principal sponsors of it. I think there are a number of other small coalition supporters, but it's obviously them and the park owners are duking it out right now.
Great question, and I can read this one easy. I've lived in my Vallejo park for 15 years. Why haven't I seen an inspector? Why not? As I mentioned, if the park is not a bad park, with lots of trash and rubbish and combustibles and stuff like that, you probably won't see an inspector for a park inspection. And it depends on how much construction is going on in there. I mean, awning porches, rehabbing houses, re-roofs. It's likely, you won't see one. So if you have an issue, a health and safety complaint, by all means go to the Mobile Home Assistance Center and file a complaint, and you will see the inspector then.
So I've got the next question, and it is, can you become a resident in a park with your name on the title with your sibling? So the corollary is, do you all have to be on the lease or not, or one of the family members? And so someone becomes a resident of a mobile home park by having a lawful right to be there. And you have a lawful right to be there by being either the owner of the home who's entered into a lease agreement with the park, or by being a guest that has been approved to be in the park. And so if you are on, let's say you've got a park, you've got a mobile home, it's in your name and your sibling's also on the title. If you go in and you make a rental agreement with the park owner, you're the resident, your sibling is not the resident. Your sibling has to have a contractual agreement with the owner before your sibling has a right to be there. Right? So being a resident is sort of ownership plus a contractual right with the owner. Now, the park owner might have requirements to send notices, especially notices of termination or notices of sale, to anyone on the title, because those people have a right to the property, a right to the mobile home, but not a right to occupy the space beneath. And so resident is specifically defined in the MRL as someone who has a legal right to be there.
What about instances of death?
Instances of death. So the park generally has the right to approve all folks who live there. So let's say you and your sibling are on the title. You're on the title as joint tenants, which means the moment one person passes away, the other person assumes full 100% ownership. So you're on the title with your sibling. You pass away. Your sibling is down in San Diego, living it up on the beach, and now they're 100% owner of this property. They don't have the right to occupy, they don't have the right to come in and move in without approval from the park owner. The park cannot unreasonably withhold approval of someone who can pay the space rent, but they do have the right to approve all occupants in the park.
Can I just follow up, because I have sort of the mirror of the situation?
Of course. So with the question?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
The mirror of the situation we're discussing. My brother is the title owner of the mobile home. We both signed with the park as residents, and I am the one occupying it. Does that present any legal complications that come to mind?
Boy, I'd have to think about that a little more, because specifically the rights that come for someone who occupies a mobile home park it's with those two elements, that you are the owner, plus you have a contractual agreement. And so a lot of the rights attach only to homeowners within a property. And so, off the top of my head, if someone else wants to take a crack at this, I would want to take another look at that. Yeah. But you certainly have a legal right to occupy. The premises is whether you get full mobile home owner protections, or whether you get a reduced, sort of the reduced state tenant protections, which are somewhat less than mobile home homeowner protections.
Okay, Brad.
Okay, like the light better. Can a mobile home park owner require the tenant to pay for tree trimming or removal of trees planted by the park and have been there longer than the mobile home? It's almost not my question, it's his question, because it depends on what your rental agreement says. And most rental agreements say you are responsible for the landscaping on your lot, to include the trees. If the tree becomes a hazard, then the park is solely responsible for it. But it could be your rental agreement says that. Short of that, it could most likely be the park's responsibility because it's a fixture in the park. But I would say the vast, vast majority of rental agreements say that you are responsible for the landscaping.
Okay, so this next question, Brad and I will probably take this. We just received our May bill, and there states a $10 Mobile Home Residency Act fee. We did not receive a notice previous. Do you know of this fee? What are the rights to pay it or not about this fee? This fee came into place by a bill called AB 3066. AB 3066 that was passed last year in the legislature and signed by the governor. It created this new mechanism for HCD to take in mobile home residency law complaints and try to get legal services. That fee goes to fund that program, and that program goes to anybody can apply for it, but the fee goes to every mobile home resident. And then Brad, I think you guys are working on the implementation of that program right now, correct?
That was what I was mentioning at the beginning. This information bulletin covers all of that. It is a $10 fee that the park can charge to the residents within 90 days of their billing. If they don't do it within 90 days, they can't charge you for it. So they're all very well aware of that. It's not quite what Eric said, it's not for everyone. A park owner cannot use this program.
That is true.
So it's only for the residents, and that's why only the residents are paying for it. So it gives you that MRL protection. Hopefully it'll work. It is a pilot program that's going to last for 3 years.
Clarify the 90 days, please.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's based on their permit to operate renewal date. And so within 90 days of that permit to operate billing notice that they get, they can charge the resident for that $10 fee, because that's included in their permit to operate renewal fee.
So is that actually in the rent, or is that a special?
It's not a $10 increase. You said, is that part of the rent? It's really not. They don't have to give you advance notice of that like you typically would any fee increase. It's a straight $10 annual assessment. Yeah, it's not $1 or 75 cents a month. It's $10 one shot. Yes, ma'am.
Could you clarify when you say resident and owner? And I thought that you had to own your unit to live in it, and you can't rent it.
It depends. When you're talking about residents and owners, and you're saying you were under the impression that you had to own your unit. Most places in most parks, yes, that's true. But there are parks that allow subletting. So it depends. It would go to the registered owner of the unit, or whoever's on the rental agreement, because that's what the park is going to charge it to.
The owner you were talking about was the park owner, in terms of they're getting their billing, and then within 90 days they can...
Correct, that's what I was saying.
Yes.
It's the park owner gets their permit to operate renewal notice. That fee is in there by the number of mobile home lots they have.
Back to the closure, you said the lady doesn't have it, but Phoenicia does. How do they hunt that?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear you.
As far as the closure, so Phoenicia has it, so if our park decides to
Yeah, I have no idea what Benicia's closure ordinance says. You maybe can handle that one, but typically it gives other provisions that I mentioned, that they have to pay you in-place value for your home, or they have to pay you a certain amount to, compensate you in an apartment for 2 years, or, there's all kinds of different provisions. They're all different.
Right, and I certainly didn't mean to bring that up to confuse anybody. It's just the state provisions that are in the civil code and in the government code are the floor. And so in absence of anything more specific from a city or a county, that's the process that everyone has to follow, that every park owner would have to follow when they want to close a park. And it just so happens that among, not just Benicia, but around here only Benicia has decided to do something a little more specific. Right, and so how did they decide? My guess is somebody who had some knowledge of the impact of a mobile home closure, the impact of that on residents of the community, got the ear of a city council person and made that a priority for that city council. And I think it was passed in 1982, 1974. It's been around for a while, and so, it's just happenstance.
This one is rent increases yearly, how to decrease amount. I think that goes back to this issue that Ollie mentioned. A lot of those are all done through local ordinances. So you can contact again your local city council, your county board of supervisors for any kind of local ordinance that controls that. I think even the city of Davis is contemplating something at the moment on that. But every city and jurisdiction does something different.
Question. Now where I live at, ours has went up almost 15% in the last 3 years. And fall under the MLL. And zero has been done to the park in the last 15 years. The streets, the maintenance, anything else to the park. And you was talking earlier about being forced out. I'm kind of feeling that way. Like we're being forced out of the park because of rent increases.
Yeah, again, though, when it comes to those local the increases, those are conversations you should have with your locals. But now, when it comes to maintenance and making sure that the park is meeting its standard of quality, that's where HCD, as part of the inspections and making sure that if there's something broken, to report that. And Brad, I don't know if you can talk about the Mobile Home Assistance Center and the where they can contact for those types of things.
Oh, I did, but just a refresher. That's this one here. If you have health or safety issues within the park, this Mobile Home Assistance Center, you can contact them. You can do it online too, which is probably a little easier, faster, because it's more specific to you. These are for health or safety issues. Obviously not yet. Mobile home residency law issues. That will be next year. There's a delay in implementing that Mobile Home Residency Law Protection Act. It's not a delay, it's to get it ramped up, to write the regulations, to hire the people, that type of stuff. So it's not going to become operative until next July.
Brad, and you have that form? You have
Yeah,
that on
there's
the
some
table?
over there. Yes.
Okay.
I'd like to follow up on the gentleman's point. As we talk about, state law is the floor. It's the bare minimum of what you get. And across the state, there's no such thing as rent control. And so the general rule is, as long as you're given advanced written notice, a landlord, including a park owner, can raise the rent as high as they want, as long as they're giving you advanced written notice. It's what the market will bear, is what they say, right? And so that's the floor, right? That's what everybody gets, whether they're a mobile home owner or a tenant in an apartment or somebody renting a granny unit. Now, specific cities have rent control, none of them in Solano County. However, Solano County, at least in Vacaville and in Vallejo, has mobile home rent control. So only for mobile home owners of the unit renting a space, there's a rent control ordinances that's tied to the consumer price index, right? And so if you folks don't live in Vallejo, your rent can go up as high, if you don't live in Vallejo and you don't have a lease that otherwise defines what a legal rental increase is, then your rent can go up as high as the market will bear, as long as you're being given advance written notice. But if you're living in Vallejo and you're seeing a 15% increase, I'm not very good at math, that's why I became a lawyer, but I would guess that that likely does not comply with the mobile home rental control ordinances, which is back in effect here in Vallejo. That might be something you want to examine. But if you don't live in Vallejo, then the only thing that will define whether you can get a rental increase or not is your lease. Oh, this is Napa. Okay, so then I'm just the dog. But I know that the folks at Fair Housing Napa probably know these like the back of their hand, so they would be a great resource for you, sir.
How does rent control get into
So yeah.
We have a ton of questions here, so if you have more questions, I know sometimes it's nice to be able to get responses spontaneously, but please fill out another card and so we can respect the people that have already asked their question. So I have a question here. It says, can a mobile home park tell you who you can and cannot have as a roommate, even though roommate was arrested and has a restraining order of 100 yards?
Well, I don't think that's me. You want to do that one, Eric?
Thank you. Okay, this might be it. Well, I'll start this and then I'll go to Ollie on the restraining order case.
Is the restraining order to protect from the mobile home owner?
I have no idea who wrote that question, but again, who can you have? If you go to your mobile home residency law, there's a section here and it says guests. And in fact, Senator Dodd actually wrote a bill to make it a little easier to have a guest and not be charged a fee to have someone as a companion living with you. So if you went in the index, it says guests, and then you go into rules and regulations, it'll say page 10, and if you go to page 10 here, there's a whole half page on your rights about who you can have. And one of the most recent changes that happened, went into effect last year, is that for a full calendar year, you can have a guest with no additional fee that's your companion. But if that person leaves, you only get it once a year. So it's making sure that way you're not using your mobile home as a local Motel 6 or something. But there, as far as guests, you have your rights on who you can have. And my advice to you is read this section here on page 10 that talks about that. Now, Ollie, I don't know, you want to take a crack at the restraining order question?
Just wanted to add something. Rent control.
We should. So why don't we chat about rent control afterward? I don't want to jeopardize or monopolize the conversation. I'd like to answer this.
Interrupted already, so they want me to fill out another one.
Well, so let me answer the question we've got now, but I can make sure that you and I chat, sir, before I leave, okay? And so the question, so the general provision is that a park owner has the right to approve or disapprove guests or people who live with you, but they can't unreasonably withhold that approval. And so that approval is generally based off of the proclivity of somebody to follow park rules. So it's ultimately their call. As far as a restraining order goes, I don't know who has the restraining order against anybody, but a restraining order would override everything, right? So it would override the lease, it would override any local, ordinance that talks about who can share the mobile home with you. And so if the park owner has a restraining order against your guest, then your guest can't be there anymore because the park owner can enforce that. And that's sort of the way it is. So, but in the restraining order process, you have the ability to modify or terminate a restraining order. You have the ability to respond to one. So if you feel like your guest might be being targeted, they do have a right to bring that up in court and try and get that terminated.
Brad, you get
Brad, why don't you?
Yeah, just one other thing is, if you have a guest and something happens to you, that guest has no rights of tenancy. So as was mentioned before, the park has the right to approve anybody moving in or renting a space in the park.
Brad, why don't you go ahead with your next question?
Okay.
It's good. Do we have to pay online instead of by check? No. It's faster, it's easier, but no, you don't have to. It takes longer to process, and they are a little bit behind it, by the way, with our move
to that new location. For whatever reason, the post office kept mail for like 2 months. It didn't forward it the way they were supposed to, so we're quite a bit behind in processing stuff. The other one, can the landlord move your property lines? No, not without your written authorization. Also, the only way to move a lot line in a park is with a permit. So they not only need a permit from the enforcement agency, which would be us, they also need your written authorization, and there's specific language as to what they're saying and that you sign. So it is written into regulations. It's section 1105 of the Title 25 regulations. And the other issue is, or the other part of that is, only the park can get that permit to move lot lines. We won't issue the permit without that written authorization from you, but a resident cannot get a permit to move lot lines in a park. So hopefully that answers that one. And then, what exactly can be in the yard beside the home? Or besides the home, I'm thinking. Normal accessory structures, awnings, porches, carports, decks. Remember the city of Long Beach has a provision that you can't have indoor furniture outdoors. I don't know why, but that's not something that we would enforce. We deal, again, with the health and safety issues of things. You can have something in your rental agreement, and it has to be reasonable. They can't say you can only have yellow couches or something. So it has to be a reasonable park rule. But as far as HCD is concerned, it's awnings, porches, storage cabinet, that type of stuff. There's also, what we limit is the amount of coverage you can do to that lot. It's a 75% maximum. So that includes your home, the awnings, porches, storage cabinet. You can't cover 100% of the lot. So you can only cover 75%, which is really small. A small amount left over. But that's a light ventilation issue, where you're not crammed and your neighbor isn't like right on top of it.
Go ahead.
Okay. I live in a manufactured home park in Napa. What, if anything, I guess that's what would prevent the owner from selling the park to a developer who might then change the use of the land? Again, this is more your thing, but that's a closure ordinance. They'd have to deal with anytime anybody proposes a change in use of land. They have to go through local land use issues and local planning and zoning. There's provisions in the government code for doing that, but one of the specific things for mobile home parks is they have to provide an impact report on the displaced residents. So they have to create that. If there is no rezoning, in other words, they're going to keep it as residential land and maybe build an apartment or something, then it takes a year to close the park. If there is a rezoning, and they have to have a meeting for it with the zoning commission, then that's a 6-month issue. But that isn't covered in the sections of the government code are in the mobile home residency law. It's under basically the eviction proceedings, because that's what they would be doing. 798.56, and it has the government code sections in there that are that refer to closure, park closure.
One more.
Oh, I got one more? Cool.
Yeah.
I'm popular. If a contractor is constructing retaining walls, okay, without engineer drawings or permits, and a complaint is filed, will the job site be inspected? Will the person that filed the complaint be notified of the results of the inspection? I feel I'm getting set up. It depends on the retaining wall, for one. If it is a structural retaining wall. In other words, it's, for one, more than 4 feet, or it's retaining a surcharge, and a surcharge is a load in addition to the load of the dirt. In a hillside where you have an angle coming in, that's a surcharge, and you build a wall here, the surcharge is up there. If it's flat on top, that's not a surcharge. And so you don't need a permit to do that unless it's more than 4 feet high. If that is the case, if the retaining wall is more than 4 feet high or it's retaining a surcharge, then you may file a complaint, and yes, it will be inspected. All complaints are open until they're resolved. So it may take a little while depending upon the workload. And in this area, that one was a Napa one. It's very, like I mentioned, we're really overloaded with work in the Bay Area in general.
Okay. This next one, I encourage you to talk to Terry as well. What is a relationship between VMC and GSMOL? Comment by check number mentioned GSMOL. Well, VMC is a local or regional organization. GSMOL is a statewide organization with local chapters. One thing you should know that at the legislature, when the senators and assembly members are looking at positions and who's supporting and who's opposing, they do look for the statewide organizations to see where they're at. And that gives the legislators a sense of kind of where the sentiment is on a piece of legislation. Your legislator will look for their local people to see are they involved. For example, in this area, it'll be VMC. In the Sacramento area, it's an organization called SAC, the Sacramento Area Coalition of Mobile Home Park Residents. And but that's the major difference. You have a statewide organization and then you have local organizations. Some of them, like SAC, now work with GSMOL. They didn't in the past, but now they do. So everyone is different. But you can ask Terry afterwards more about that question.
Oh, yes. You right now, Tim? The question I've got is, does the mobile home residency law apply to a park owned by residents by owning shares? And yes, the MRL applies to all parks. It's defined as an area held open with 2 or more sites for habitation in a mobile home. So yes. Oh no. So no. What?
Only Article 9.
Only Article 9. Do you want to, Brad, should have given you this one in the first place?
Yeah, that's actually, where are we here? If it's a resident-owned park, only Article 9 applies. It specifically exempts Articles 1 through 8 for, where are we?
First 15 pages.
Yeah.
Yeah. 1 through 33, I think it is.
Yeah, but anyway, looking to see where it says that would make a big difference. But basically, it's a resident-owned park.
You're looking it up. I just want to also mention that in the magazine that Terry Foreman helps produce every month, on page 8, there's an article about home sharing and the Napa Home Sharing Matchup Program, which is a free service. So one of the earlier questions was in that area. So this is the page in the magazine that you could refer to if you need more information on that. So were you close to?
Sorry.
Okay.
It's section 799.1. That basically it says, except provided in this subdivision, this article, which is Article 9, shall govern the rights of a resident who has an ownership interest in a subdivision, cooperative, or condominium for mobile homes, or a resident-owned mobile home park of which he or has a mobile home where their home is, mobile home is located. In a subdivision, cooperative, or condominium for mobile homes or resident-owned mobile home park, Articles 1, and let's skip that to Article 8, inclusive, shall apply only to residents who do not have an ownership interest in the subdivision. So, you're governed by different rules. You're governed by most likely the Davis-Sterling Common Interest Development Act, which deals with, you know, who's on the board, what you have to do, what reserves you have, all that kind of thing. You're governed under different rules. That's a park that would have CC&Rs. There are rare instances where residents are owners of the park, but not real owners of the land. They have, they own a corporation that they lease the lots back from. So it's a tax issue, but that one would be different. It's kind of rare when that happens, but it is where you buy into the corporation that owns the park and you rent your space back. So that one's a little bit different. But most cooperatives, where you're a stock cooperative, you own stock in it, that Articles 1 to 8 of the MRO would not apply.
Okay, we might need to poll the audience for this one. Why can't we enforce? It looks like a CC 200, which I don't understand what that, or is that might be a CN 20? What do you think? Oh, Civil Code 700. Okay. Yeah, I don't know because I'm not sure what Civil Code 700 is. Mobile home residence index starts at 798. So if anybody has a clear question about what they're asking for, we'll look it up. I don't know.
So this card says, can management dictate the color of mobile homes as long as it's a neutral type color and not purple, red, etc.? Management has a small palette that they want all mobile homes to be. I don't like their selections, and I don't want to live in what will look like, I guess I can't quite read it, but maybe it's not good that I read it anyway. But anyway, anybody want to tackle that one?
That's a rental agreement issue. They can.
All right, apparently the answer to that one is refer to your rental agreement, because it's specific to the rental agreement in any particular park. Another one, when did flood tie-down law become effective? I bought my home in 2005 and I'm unable to get insurance due to the fact that it's not tied down or no tie-downs are installed when the home was installed.
If your home was installed in 2005, probably not. It's an older home.
Brand new.
It has tie downs. All tie downs are required for every home that was installed after September of 1994, but they may not be flood tie downs. The only tie downs that are effective in flooding are auger type of tie downs. Most installers don't use those unless they have to. So you can get, there's different reasons for flood insurance or why you can or can't get it. But all homes have tie downs, but they're for wind. And that's, we changed the regulations not too long ago. When did they come into play? It changes quite a bit. All floodplain requirements are federal. So it's the federal, it's called a FIRM, it's a flood insurance rate maps. And it has changed over the last 5 or 6 years ago. They started reassessing things as a 200-year floodplain. So now things are in a floodplain that weren't ever before. So it is a federal requirement to set homes above floodplain height or whatever the floodplain height is. And so we have to do that. In a mobile home park, if it's an existing mobile home park that has not had significant flood damage, the home only has to be set 3 feet, regardless of what the flood.
I believe it's set 5 feet, and it is a flood zone. It floods there every time it rains.
Okay, so,
It has not gotten inside yet.
okay,
But the first year that it flooded out right over there, I contacted FEMA. They said if I didn't have flood tie-downs, they could not insure me for the flood. Because if they did, and the house was damaged, they would not pay.
well, you can certainly get tie downs that are acceptable as, for use in a floodplain. Now, whether they'll accept that or not, I couldn't tell you that. We don't deal with that aspect. But we do have what we call standard plan approved plans for auger type of tie downs that will work in a floodplain. It has to prevent the home from being dislodged in an earthquake. In a flood.
Would that be federal FEMA?
No, it would be through HCD. You'd have to get a permit to install the tie downs or hire somebody to install them. That really isn't a big deal. It's very common.
You know, my biggest concern is when the house was installed, why didn't the inspectors take note of the fact that it wasn't installed properly?
No, it was installed properly. It's not required to have floodplain tie downs on it. All we're saying is, because the federal law changed a while ago, so it was not 20 years ago, and that made all homes after that date. We changed our regulations to match up to that. It was after your home was installed. So you do have tie downs. They're just not tie downs that are approved for use in the floodplain. Although I don't know what tie downs you have. Generally, they're not. So. Yeah, good thing I can. Previously allowed by prior management, and state has passed inspection in the past. Is that grandfather? Oh, yes, that would be a true grandfather. If you did something legally, and basically if you did something legally a long time ago and the law changed to now prohibit that, that's what grandfathering is. That one's still good. So the same thing would apply to if the park allowed you to do something and now they're saying you can't do that anymore. That would have to be grandfathered in. I would really encourage you to get anything in writing. Whatever the park agreed to, get a copy of it in writing so that you can come back and use that later. If it was something that was inspected, by all means, that makes it legal.
All right. I was looking for my notes for the exact codes here for this one, but why doesn't the park have to post what they pay for gas, electricity, water, etc.? Why do they charge us whatever they want? How is this ethical or legal? Well, they cannot charge you whatever they want for gas and utilities. They have to charge you what the actual delivery of the utility is. And if you believe that you are being overcharged or that the rate is not appropriate, you can actually contact the Public Utilities Commission. And even if you are in a, say, a private water district, not a local city or municipal district, the PUC has the authority to also come in and inspect the rate and even set that rate, even if it's a private utility provider. And so if you contact the California Public Utilities Commission, depending on whether it's water, gas, or electricity. Now, if it's a municipal provider, more than likely the rate, you can just contact either your city water provider, your county water provider, or if it's East Bay Mud, they're very strictly governed, and you can contact them and they'll respond quickly. But if it's a private entity like PG&E or Fremont Water or whatnot, then the Public Utilities Commission can respond to that. Yes, you had your question.
That was my question, and I forgot to write down. What about for trash? we pay a fee to have our trash removed. However, the park probably charges what Vallejo garbage charges, or whatever their current name is. However, they will not let us throw things in our trash that Vallejo garbage will let them. They tell us you can't throw stuff away, but you can't have stuff build up on your home, so you have to pay extra to take that crap to the dump.
I mean, maybe you can talk about junk and debris, but for the most part, when it comes to fees, even if it's with your local folks, I would immediately call your solid waste department in Vallejo and let them know that situation. The cities will crack down on anybody who's making money off it.
You can't throw clothes away, you can't throw lock handles away, tons of stuff. You can't put your garbage because it doesn't work in their crushers and it might damage the crusher.
That doesn't sound right to me, but yeah, I couldn't answer that question.
If you put a pile out in the street, Vallejo, the city of Vallejo has to pick it up.
Sorry.
What
Yes.
did you mean when you said that they have to charge you what the delivery is?
So most state law, because of Prop 218, that the public utility, any public utility can only bill you for the actual cost of delivering that service. The prevailing rate of delivering that service. And there's a study that goes in when they develop the fee to say, what's it going to cost to actually pay the people to do that? They can't just say, well, we're going to increase it $5 more so we can use that money for some other project. Like localities, and generally that's why you see that local governments have lower rates than the private utilities, is because they're not allowed to add a profit onto the delivery of that fee. That's what I meant by that.
But if my park, for example, resells the PG&E, they get their electricity from PG&E and resell it to me, you're saying that they cannot mark it up?
They can't mark that up. PG&E gets their rate and they get their profit margin based on what the Public Utilities Commission says. We're allowing you to get this much profit margin. Your local mobile home park can't also do that. They've got to pass through the actual fee on that. Yes.
So just piggybacking on that, so why is it that the parks get money from PG&E to maintain the equipment underground, money from the water department to maintain that equipment? If they're not maintaining that equipment, why aren't those savings passed on to us?
That's a good question. Most of that money actually didn't come from PG. Well, it came from PG&E in the sense that the legislature made them pay into a pool. And in fact, there's a pilot program that's happening with a lot of the utilities to upgrade those facilities. And so parks, there's an application process to try to improve those facilities. I wouldn't say that there's any savings on that. In fact, what those improvements are doing are preventing a catastrophe like what happened recently, I think not too far from here, about the electrical lines shorting underneath during the summer and then the entire park shutting down. I mean, those improvements are intended not to reduce the rate, but actually to prevent a bigger problem.
If maintenance been done on those properties like it should have been by park owners, then quite possibly that may not have happened.
The difference, it's called a differential, and the differential currently is so small, it's like $2 or something. It costs more than that to read the meters and to prepare the billing. Most parks don't want to be involved in dealing with that. That's why.
Our park brings their own meters.
I understand, but what I'm saying is it's a master metered park. Most parks do not want to be involved in that. It's not like they're making a lot of money. It actually costs some money because not only do they have to maintain it, but they have to read the meters, and then they have to do separate billing and notices. Typically, they pay somebody to do that, and that costs some money too.
So if they change our meter, do they have to have a permit, or are they just allowed to?
Excuse me. We're all going to have a lot of questions, and I was just going to ask Bruce and Ollie and Eric if they're going to be around afterwards. Are you guys going to be able to stay a little bit? Okay. Maybe 20 minutes. And we're already over our time. Can I get a show of hands of people that want us to keep going for a few more minutes to finish the last few cards?
Yeah.
Okay, I see 5 hands, 6 hands. So it sounds like the majority of everybody wants us to wrap up. So I'm going to read one more card, Actually, you have one more card? We'll do one more card, and then any questions that were left over, Terry Corman will try to get back to you, or she'll be around with the cards for you to ask her the questions. And why don't we just go ahead, Bruce, with your final card.
Okay. This is it's not a card, it's a card with 4 or 5 questions. You have horrible streets, and you've been promised new ones for over 7 years. In HCD's view, this park is not even required to be paved. So I understand your concern. There often is tripping hazards. It's dirty, it creates a lot of dust. If that's the instance where it's real tripping hazards and it's very dusty, it's an accumulation of dust in what we have, then by all means file a complaint to the ombudsman, I say, but the Mobile Home Assistance Center. But general cracked roadways, that may be something that Ally can help you with as a failure to maintain. If they're not maintaining the park properly, you're paying rent. Second question here, it says parking. No handicap parking anywhere in the park. Not any parking in front of the office to go and pay your rent. The handicap or disabled parking spaces are not required in the park. A mobile home park is not required to be accessible. So it is for the residents and their guests. And there's multiple court decisions and Attorney General's opinions and everything. So a mobile home park is not a public accommodation, and that's all that needs to be accessible. The office, however, is, because that's where the residents or the non-residents deal with the park. And so the office should have a disabled parking space so that a person coming to deal with the park, to rent a space or whatever, has a parking spot. Again, this isn't, I say again, but it's not something that HCD enforces. It is enforced by that person, the person who doesn't have access. It's not by a friend of that person or somebody who thinks it's a good idea. It has to be somebody who's impacted by that lack of accessibility. See, there's no control of speeding in the park. You need speed bumps. Speed bumps may or may not, there are some city ordinances that prohibit speed bumps. It slows down emergency vehicles, and that's what you don't want. They have new ones now, you'll see them that have grooves cut in them. That's so a fire truck can drive through without hitting the bump. Again, not something that we regulate. You can get the local police, or if your local jurisdiction will pass an ordinance to get the local police department in there, the park has to request it. And then, because the streets are private streets, they're not enforced by local police departments. But there is a provision it's in the residency law that says that they can do that, or the vehicle code, I'm sorry, that if you petition the park, because the park has to request it. Need specific rules on tree removal.
I think we covered that, right?
Yeah, that's not one that we cover either. Owner has never had a general meeting ever with the residents. He's been charging, I'm guessing that's rent, without getting permission from residents. That's something these guys would deal with. That's a mobile home residency law issue. And there are provisions in the residency law to where you can go to small claims court even if the park isn't complying with them. So that's about all I have for that.
All right, well, thanks everybody for bearing with us in this time that we went over a little bit. It's been great having you here today. I hope that some of your questions were answered. There are enough resources where these people that are here, that are the experts, they're accessible not just today, but anytime you want to get hold of them, and their information is at the tables here. And I want to again thank you guys for being here. Really appreciate it. Maybe a round of applause for our panelists. They promised to hang around for a few minutes. So if you have any further questions, please get back with these guys, and thanks again for coming.
Nice to meet you, Charlie. Nice to meet you.
Yes, it did.
So,